In the last part, we saw Jinwoo reunites with his sister Ajin and hides the fact that his summon, Ramba, can speak, something ordinary summons cannot do. After exploring the player marketplace, he receives money from his mother and resolves to become strong enough to repay his family. He summons several early monsters and learns dungeons now require official player registration. During registration, a terrorist attack breaks out, and Jinwoo helps examiner Park Chang-sok win by identifying the enemy's fire resistance buff. Impressed, Park investigates him and later offers either headquarters employment or a cash reward. Jinwoo chooses the money and enters the Tuesday dungeon, where a giant slime boss appears before him. As Jinwoo ordered Ramba, she immediately affirmed and cast her enhancement on the gorilla. The gorilla leaped toward the slime and smashed into the giant monster. Letting out a loud roar, the gorilla unleashed a barrage of punches without giving the slime any chance to retaliate. As Jinwoo watched the scene unfold, he believed that, as expected, Ramba could boost the attack speed of even an F-rank summon to such an extent. He imagined how incredible the result would be if the same enhancement were applied to a stronger summon in the future. Before long, a status notification appeared, informing him that he had defeated the boss monster. The clear time was recorded as 5 minutes and 32 seconds. As Jinwoo looked at the result, he believed it was actually rather slow. Back when he was God Jinnu, clearing a dungeon like this had taken him less than a minute. However, another notification soon appeared and congratulated him for setting a new record for South Korea. It further informed him that a special achievement had been unlocked. As part of the reward, he would receive 3 high-grade summoning scrolls. An additional reward of 2 low-grade abrasives was also granted. The announcement left Jinwoo shocked. Despite considering the result ordinary by his standards, he had apparently established a new national record. Meanwhile, at headquarters, the employees were equally stunned after noticing that the record rankings had changed. A superior quickly questioned the sudden update, prompting an employee to report that the beginner Tuesday dungeon had been cleared in 5 minutes and 32 seconds. The superior was visibly surprised by the giant reduction in time and initially wondered whether Kang Geonho had discovered a new combination or strategy. However, after checking the details, she was surprised to find an unfamiliar name attached to the record. The player was listed as Baek Jinwoo. She remarked that she had never heard of him before, while the employee responded that he did not appear to be a ranked player. An unranked player had broken the national record and surpassed the achievement of the previous #1 record holder. Elsewhere, one of Park Chung-sok's colleagues expressed his amazement and remarked that Jinwoo's accomplishment was incredible. Park Chung-sok smiled with satisfaction and stated that there was no doubt Jinwoo was the real deal. He further remarked that Jinwoo was a national treasure whom they needed to secure no matter what. At the very least, they had to prevent him from leaving for another country if South Korea wished to remain competitive. He immediately instructed the staff to register Baek Jinwoo as a player. The decision shocked several people who questioned whether such a move was appropriate without even conducting a player match. Park Chung-sok calmly clarified that both national and global authorities recognize time attack records. South Korea's top record had previously belonged to Kang Jeonho at 6 minutes and 41 seconds, while the global record was held by Rachel at 2 minutes and 25 seconds. Since Baek Jinwoo had already surpassed the national record, Park Chung-seok questioned whether a player match would even be meaningful. In his opinion, those with exceptional talent deserved special privileges. Several days later, Jinwoo still found the situation somewhat difficult to believe. He reflected upon the fact that a clear time of 5 minutes had become a national record. While he was thinking about the matter, a voice suddenly called out to him. Looking over, he saw Park Chang-sok running toward him with visible excitement. Park Chang-sok stated that he had wanted to see him and immediately brought up the time attack record. He remarked that the achievement was incredible and questioned how Jinwoo had managed to break the Korean record on his very first attempt. He further noted that the Tuesday Dungeon's maze was notoriously complex, making the accomplishment even more impressive. Jinwoo attempted to deflect the praise, feeling as though he were being complimented for something completely natural. Before long, Park Chang-seok handed him a card and encouraged him to accept it. He explained that it was an official player license and revealed that he had personally arranged for Jinwoo's immediate registration. According to Park Chang-seok, there was simply nothing left for him to prove. The development pleased Jinwoo considerably. Receiving official registration so quickly was certainly convenient. However, Park Chang-seok soon returned to the question that interested him the most. He cautiously asked how Jinwoo had managed to break the record. As Jinwoo considered the request, he realized that if he shared everything he knew, South Korea's overall level could rise dramatically in a very short time. The problem was, what would happen afterward? If things went well, he could enjoy fame, wealth, and government support. If things went poorly, he could end up losing everything he possessed. As Jinwoo finally responded, he first pointed out that the question Park Chang-seok had asked was extremely rude. The statement immediately caught Park Chang-seok off guard. He promptly apologized and admitted that he had crossed a line. He explained that player strategies were highly sensitive information and were usually shared only among trusted individuals. Nevertheless, he asked Jinwoo to understand that South Korea was desperately searching for talented players. As Jinwoo listened, he quietly evaluated the man before him. Park Chang-seok did not seem like a bad person. He had transferred the promised money without delay, possessed a decent personality, and appeared quick to understand situations. As Jinwoo thought about it further, he began considering a different approach. Perhaps, rather than avoiding the government altogether, he could make use of its resources. If he handled things correctly, he might be able to grow much faster than he could on his own. With that in mind, he suggested moving somewhere more private. Once they arrived at a quieter location, Park Chang-seok stated that he would speak honestly. He pleaded for Jinwoo's assistance and explained that headquarters genuinely needed his knowledge. He then admitted that they had investigated Jinwoo's background and learned that he had spent 3 years bedridden in a hospital. The revelation caused Jinwoo to glare at him immediately. Park Chang-seok quickly apologized and explained that highly skilled unregistered players occasionally turned out to be connected to criminal syndicates. Because of that possibility, headquarters had considered the investigation necessary. Jinwoo firmly stated that now that he was officially registered, there should be no further investigations and requested that such actions not be repeated, to which Park Chang-seok readily agreed. As the conversation continued, Park Chang-seok reflected that most people became intimidated whenever the government was mentioned. In contrast, Jinwoo showed no signs of fear and appeared fully aware of his own value. Jinwoo then remarked that he had also been considering the matter and questioned what exactly he would gain from helping the government. Park Chang-seok replied that, although it felt somewhat awkward to admit, he held a fairly influential position within headquarters. Since examiners were elected through public votes, strong performance could earn him additional support and help him rise even higher. The explanation caused Jinwoo to wonder whether Park Chang-seok was thinking more like a politician than an official. Nevertheless, Park Chang-seok assured him that he would provide every form of support available within the limits of his authority. While Jinwoo appreciated the offer, he found it somewhat vague. Since Park Chang-seok was a public official, he could not simply use government resources however he wished. After giving the matter some thought, Jinwoo proposed a 1-month arrangement. Since he had only recently become a registered player, he would accept Park Chang-seok's support for 1 month while continuing to grow. If he was satisfied with the results, they could continue working together afterward. If not, he would either return whatever benefits he had received or provide information of equal value in exchange. As Park Chang-seok listened, he realized that Jinwoo was essentially proposing to use him as a personal assistant for an entire month. The request was undeniably bold, but he believed the benefits would outweigh the inconvenience. Convinced that remaining close to Jinwoo would ultimately be advantageous, Park Chang-seok readily agreed to the arrangement. Taking a pause, Jinwoo told Park Chang-seok that, first of all, he needed him to avoid spreading news about his record-breaking time. He explained that he was concerned about his safety. Park Chang-sok questioned why he was worried and began stating that headquarters would protect him, but he stopped midway. He knew there was no way headquarters, which could not properly handle a single gang or adequately protect its own talented players, would be able to guarantee his safety. Park Chang-sok eventually affirmed that he would do his best to keep the matter contained. However, he admitted that he did not believe they could completely stop the information from spreading. Jinwoo replied that it should be fine and stated that he would be taking his leave. After Park Chang-sok affirmed, Jinwoo reflected that it was good that he had at least convinced him to remain quiet for the time being. Smiling to himself, he decided it was finally time to examine the rewards he had received earlier. Reaching a secluded location, he looked through the rewards and was immediately surprised. The abrasives were valuable enough, but the 3 high-grade summoning scrolls were on a completely different level. As expected, the rewards granted for a first-time achievement, which could only be obtained once per player, truly lived up to their reputation. He wanted to use the scrolls immediately, but gambling everything on only 3 scrolls seemed too risky. It might be better to sell them and turn them into guaranteed money instead. At that moment, Jinwoo accessed the player web application, which was only available to players officially registered through headquarters. The examiner had informed him that nearly all item trading was conducted through the platform. As he browsed through the marketplace and checked the prices, he was stunned to discover that a single high-grade summoning scroll sold for roughly 3 million won. His hands trembled slightly as he calculated the total value. If each scroll was worth that much, then he had effectively earned 9 million won from a dungeon run that had only taken a little over 5 minutes. The realization left him speechless. If his specs continued to improve and he kept clearing stronger dungeons, the amount he could earn would become unimaginable. Thinking about his father, his mother, and Ajin, he quietly resolved that he would make sure they never had to worry about money again. After some consideration, he decided to sell the high-grade scrolls and use the proceeds to purchase low-grade summoning scrolls instead. The training instructor and the dragon mage had already proven themselves to be overpowered summons capable of defeating even B-rank players. As he listed the high-grade scrolls for sale, he continued browsing the marketplace and soon noticed something strange. Low-grade summoning scrolls were piled up everywhere. There were countless sellers and very few buyers, yet every listing remained fixed at 5,001 won. There were no cheaper offers despite the overwhelming supply. Finding the situation odd, Jinwoo immediately thought of someone who could provide an explanation. Calling Ajin, he questioned what was happening with the low-grade scroll market. Ajin explained that headquarters was purchasing them in bulk. Under the pretext of supporting rankers and strengthening the country, they used government funds to buy large quantities of low-grade summoning scrolls. The minimum purchase price had been fixed at 5,000 won. Since players could always sell directly to headquarters, nobody had any reason to lower their prices, even when the market was flooded with excess stock. Ajin further remarked that the policy might eventually be cut because it had become a burden. When Jinwoo questioned why such a system still existed, she explained that it was a leftover policy from the early days. As a result, low-grade summoning scrolls that headquarters did not even need continued piling up in storage. After thanking Ajin for the explanation, Jinwoo ended the call and considered the information carefully. If headquarters truly had an enormous surplus of low-grade summoning scrolls, then perhaps he could use that to his advantage. The following day, he visited Park Chang-sok again. Park Chang-sok welcomed him enthusiastically and jokingly remarked that Jinwoo must have missed him already if he had come back so soon. Jinwoo casually affirmed that he had simply happened to be nearby. When Park Chang-sok questioned whether he needed something, Jinwoo directly asked whether he could obtain some low-grade summoning scrolls. Park Chang-sok questioned how many he needed, only for Jinwoo to reply that he wanted as many as possible. The request caused Park Chang-sok to reflect that headquarters received around 50,000 low-grade summoning scrolls every day anyway, so giving some away would not be a major issue. Park Chang-sok remarked that he could certainly provide them. However, he questioned whether Jinwoo intended to buy them only to resell them later. Jinwoo immediately denied it and explained that, since the market was already overflowing and they were difficult to sell anyway, he planned to use them himself. Hearing that answer, Park Chung-sok became even more curious. He believed that Jinwoo was different from ordinary players. For someone like him to actively collect low-grade summoning scrolls, there had to be a specific purpose behind it. Eventually, Park Chang-sok agreed to the request, but stated that he had one condition. He asked Jinwoo to provide a piece of useful information first. As an examiner elected by the people, he explained that he could not simply hand out assets purchased with tax money without justification. When Jinwoo questioned whether useful information would be exchanged for an equivalent amount of low-grade summoning scrolls, Park Chang-sok affirmed that it would. He further remarked that he needed a few safeguards for himself as well. Jinwoo reflected that Park Chang-sok clearly had no intention of giving things away for free. However, he actually preferred that approach. It meant that if he provided valuable information, Park Chang-sok would likely reward him appropriately. Nodding, Jinwoo began explaining the first piece of information. He introduced a concept known as achievement time shaving. According to him, the national first-place achievement reward for a dungeon consisted of 3 high-grade summoning scrolls. However, the reward could be earned again whenever another player broke the existing record. Therefore, if multiple players took turns improving the record by even a single second, they could repeatedly claim the rewards while gradually strengthening South Korea as a whole. Park Chung-sok listened carefully before responding that headquarters was already familiar with the concept. He remarked that several current top players had used similar methods before. Since many players had yet to receive the achievement even once, he did not believe there would be any immediate issues. Jinwoo then stated that the real information he intended to share was the clear strategy for the Tuesday dungeon. Park Chang-sok's eyes immediately lit up. Excitedly, he questioned whether it was the same method Jinwoo had used to set the record. Jinwoo frowned and affirmed it, as he inwardly noted that the strategy originated from the 5 emperors. According to him, anyone who followed the method correctly could potentially clear the dungeon within the 3-minute range. Park Chung-sok was visibly shocked by the claim and questioned whether such a thing was truly possible. Before revealing any details, however, Jinwoo remarked that they should settle the price first. Information of that level was far too valuable to give away casually. He proposed a price of 50 high-grade summoning scrolls. The number immediately stunned Park Chang-sok. In monetary terms, it amounted to roughly 150 million won. Jinwoo calmly remarked that the amount was actually cheap considering the value of the information. The strategy was not limited to a single low-level dungeon. It was a method that could be applied to dungeons ranging from low-tier all the way to top-tier content. The clear rewards obtained through such efficiency would eventually be worth billions. After a long moment of consideration, Park Chung-sok finally nodded. He stated that if the information proved correct, headquarters would immediately deposit 150 million won and provide Jinwoo with 10,000 low-grade summoning scrolls every single day. Hearing the offer, Jinwoo confidently affirmed that Park Chang-sok would not regret the deal. Afterward, a number of employees gathered together, prompting one of them to question why everyone had been called right at clock-out time. Park Chang-sok replied that he had gathered them because there was something he wanted to test. The employee remarked that an examiner would not call them together without a reason, so it was unlikely to be an ordinary test. Park Chung-sok responded that everyone was already aware that the Tuesday dungeon record had recently been broken, to which the employee affirmed that he had heard about it. Park Chung-sok then explained that he had managed to obtain an excellent strategy from abroad and had already tested it using player Jinwoo. According to him, the results had been outstanding. When another employee questioned whether that was why he had ordered everyone not to spread the information, Park Chung-sok affirmed and stated that the reason for gathering them was simple. From now on, they would be conducting time attacks on the Tuesday dungeon. He then introduced the key summon required for the strategy, a spotted Komodo. The employees appeared confused. The spotted Komodo was known as a large lizard-type summon roughly the size of an adult man. It possessed decent durability and respectable attack power, making it an average bruiser-type summon. At least that was the common understanding. In reality, being a B-rank summon made it difficult to raise, while its damage and tanking abilities were mediocre compared to other B-rank summons, causing many players to regard it as a dud. However, what most users did not know was that the spotted Komodo's pre-Ugia prey was the giant slime. Simply releasing it inside the Tuesday dungeon allowed it to automatically hunt the slimes efficiently, making rapid clears possible. After testing the strategy, the employees quickly cleared the dungeon. The completion time continued dropping, and they reached the boss room in less than 4 minutes. The staff members were shocked, remarking that Park Chang-suk had been telling the truth all along. Several of them praised the small summon, calling it a lifesaver. Others noted that they would no longer need to worry about polishing agents, while one employee remarked that, with a movement speed rune equipped, they might even be capable of challenging the world record. A few days later, articles began appearing across the country reporting that South Korea was repeatedly breaking Tuesday dungeon records. Seeing the results, Park Chang-suk became even more convinced that Jinwoo's value extended far beyond that of an ordinary first-year gamer. He decided to create a dedicated team specifically for Baek Jinwoo, and quickly selected 3 suitable members for the task. Several days later, Jinwoo received a transaction totaling 116,700,501. The amount immediately shocked him. As he stared at the balance, he wondered whether making money was always supposed to be this easy. On top of that, his inventory was completely filled with summoning scrolls. The 10,000 low-grade summoning scrolls had been delivered by headquarters employees earlier that morning, proving that Park Chang-suk had kept his promise. Since Park Chang-suk had fulfilled his side of the agreement, Jinwoo believed it was time for him to do his part as well. Calling out to Ramba, he questioned whether she was ready. Jinwoo then stated that it was finally time for the endless grind to begin. He immediately started tearing scroll after scroll. However, after pulling countless duds, he gradually became exhausted. Looking at the results, he noted that he had already opened 3,600 scrolls within a single hour. He questioned whether something worthwhile should have appeared by now. At that moment, Ramba poked at him and remarked that of course, nothing special would appear so easily. She questioned whether he truly believed an X-rank summon would drop that effortlessly. Jinwoo pointed out that she herself had appeared on his very first attempt. Ramba responded that her appearance had simply been pure luck. According to her, obtaining an X rank from 10,000 scrolls would not even be close to enough, let alone 100,000. Confused, Jinwoo questioned what she meant. Ramba replied that he clearly knew very little about the summoning system. She explained that the total number of summons in existence was exactly 10% of the total number of players. There were likely over 800 million copies of the horned caterpillar summon he had just pulled. However, the most important detail was that isolated summons were unique. There was only one of each isolated summon in existence. Hearing this, Jinwoo was visibly shocked. Ramba admitted that she did not know the exact reason behind it either. The only thing she knew for certain was that he seemed to be the only person capable of pulling isolated X-rank summons. As Jinwoo processed the information, he realized just how absurd the odds truly were. There were tens of thousands of different summon types, and many of them existed in the hundreds of millions. Yet he somehow needed to pull a one-of-a-kind isolated X rank from among all of them. In his view, winning the lottery multiple times in a row would probably be easier. Ramba attempted to reassure him and explained that once a summon had been pulled, it would not appear again unless it was sold. For example, if all 800 million horned caterpillars were summoned, then horned caterpillars would never appear from future summons again. Although the explanation offered some comfort, Jinwoo still believed the task would be incredibly difficult. For a moment, he considered switching to mid-grade summoning scrolls instead. However, he quickly dismissed the idea. Mid-grade scrolls were expensive, difficult to obtain, and far less common on the market. Even if the odds were terrible, low-grade scrolls remained his best option. With renewed determination, Jinwoo continued tearing through the scrolls one after another, silently hoping and praying that at least one X-rank summon would finally appear. After long hours, Jinwoo jumped onto the bed and screamed that he was seriously going to die. He could hardly believe that he had torn through 140,000 summoning scrolls in just 2 weeks. Ramba replied that she had almost died in more ways than one. Meanwhile, Jinwoo reflected that he had even rented a room near the player zone solely to synthesize summons, as he could not continue relying on his parents forever. Getting back up, he stated that they should head out and synthesize again today. Ramba immediately cried out for creamy bread instead. Later, at the synthesis shop located inside a hotel, Jinwoo observed how much the world had changed. Just as Jamsil Tower had become the Tower of Trials, many buildings had been repurposed. This hotel had become a synthesis shop, despite once being famous for its buffet. After receiving waiting number 125, he waited until their turn arrived. Once inside, Jinwoo told Ramba that he was counting on her, and she confidently affirmed. As the synthesis panel appeared before him, Jinwoo selected the synthesis option. Fire Lizard Frank disappeared first, followed by Blue, while numerous other summons were sacrificed in the process. Soon, a notification appeared. Wind Fairy Ramba, X rank, had reached level 21, and her intelligence had increased by 2. Looking at the result, Jinwoo could only sigh. After grinding through 140,000 summons, she had only reached level 21. Ramba proudly flexed and questioned whether she looked stronger. Jinwoo affirmed, though he quietly thought that if the maximum level was around 100, this process was going to take forever. A few days later, at headquarters, Park Chang-sok appeared to be in an unusually good mood. He remarked that work felt especially enjoyable lately and questioned Byung-jin about it. Park Chang-sok noted that they had even formed a talent management team and stated that he intended to devote all his efforts to supporting Jinwoo during this term. Curious, he asked Byung-jin what Jinwoo was currently doing. Byung-jin reported that Jinwoo seemed to be opening summoning scrolls endlessly and had requested even more that day. He further explained that Jinwoo wanted to use part of the 150 million won he had received to purchase additional low-grade summoning scrolls. Byung-jin added that Jinwoo had also asked whether he could buy them below market price. Although he had told Jinwoo that he would look into it, the management bureau had begun questioning why they were taking so many scrolls recently. Hearing this, Park Chang-sok reflected that Jinwoo was reinvesting a huge amount of money into low-grade summoning scrolls that barely sold. There was clearly something unusual going on. Without hesitation, Park Chang-sok instructed Byung-jin to sell them to Jinwoo at half price. Byung-jin was immediately shocked and pointed out that such special treatment could become a serious issue if discovered. Park Chang-sok simply smiled and assured him not to worry. He explained that Jinwoo could become South Korea's hero in the future, and if people later learned how much effort he had put into supporting him, it could even improve his approval ratings. Meanwhile, Jinwoo looked completely exhausted as he continued tearing through summoning scrolls. Ramba sat nearby with her hands clasped together, almost praying as she questioned how much longer they would keep doing this. Jinwoo replied that they would continue until either he died or she did. At that moment, a voice suddenly called out to him. A woman politely introduced herself as Yujia from headquarters. Jinwoo questioned what had brought her there. Yujia explained that she had come regarding the summoning scroll purchase he had discussed with the examiner. Jinwoo immediately asked whether there was any chance of negotiating the price. Yujia revealed that headquarters had recently held a meeting and, considering his contributions, had decided to provide him with a special offer. The scrolls would be sold to him at half price. The announcement shocked Jinwoo. Yujia further explained that their team had also approved an additional 100 million won under the talent management support budget. However, she stressed that the arrangement had to remain an absolute secret. Jinwoo readily affirmed and assured her that there would be no problems. Lowering her voice slightly, Yujia remarked that they hoped he understood that this support was intended to build a positive relationship between them. Jinwoo replied that he understood perfectly. After wishing him well, Yujia stated that he appeared busy and took her leave. Watching her depart, Jinwoo felt that he could genuinely sense Park Chang-seok's determination to support him. Because of that, he felt even more motivated to pull an X-rank summon and repay that trust. Later that night, Ramba looked utterly drained as she once again questioned how long they would continue this routine. Jinwoo replied that they would keep going until they obtained the training instructor and dragon mage. Ramba groaned and remarked that she felt as though she would develop hives from hearing the sound of scrolls being torn apart. Jinwoo understood her frustration, but he felt he had no choice. Having come this far, he intended to keep going even out of sheer stubbornness. As he continued opening scroll after scroll, he silently pleaded for an X-rank summon to appear. Then suddenly, a brilliant flash erupted. Lightning crackled around a scroll the moment it opened. Jinwoo froze in shock, immediately recognizing the phenomenon. It was the exact same effect that had appeared when Ramba was summoned. A notification window appeared before him, announcing that player Baek Jinwoo had obtained the Summon Dragon Mage, X rank. Both Jinwoo and Ramba cried out in disbelief before embracing one another. After all the effort, they had finally done it. Jinwoo exclaimed that he could die happy now. However, he quickly shook his head and reminded himself that this was not the time to relax. They had finally gained momentum, and stopping now would be a mistake. With renewed determination, Jinwoo immediately tore another scroll, and notification suddenly appeared. Player Baek Jinwoo had obtained the Summon Training Instructor EX rank. Ramba stared in disbelief before shouting that the momentum was real. Jinwoo quickly clenched his fist as the reality sank in. After weeks of endless grinding, countless scrolls, and exhausting effort, they had finally succeeded. The two X-rank summons they had been searching for were now in his possession. As the training instructor summon looked around and questioned where he was, Jinwoo reflected that the summon was originally unpopular because he was only an E rank with weak combat abilities. However, his true value lay elsewhere. He was a training fanatic who grew through training and charisma. Although Hungyo himself was not particularly strong and his basic skills were unimpressive, once he acquired his instructor abilities through growth, he became a completely different summon. His greatest skill allowed him to unlock the hidden potential of other summons and drastically increase their growth speed. With that ability, Jinwoo could strengthen all of his other summons, which was one of the reasons he had remained ahead of other rankers in the past. Waving at him, Jinwoo remarked that it had been a while. Hungyo noted the nickname and immediately questioned whether he was truly God Jinu. When Jinwoo affirmed, both summonses were visibly shocked. Hungyo immediately bowed and stated that it was an honor to see his lord again. He remarked that after being placed in isolated status for an unknown reason, he had thought they would never meet again. Looking at them, Jinwoo realized that both Ramba and Hungyo were exactly as he remembered raising them. Meanwhile, the fire summon stepped forward and questioned whether he was truly Lord God Jinu. It was the first time Jinwoo had heard her voice. She was Pokryong, the Dragon Mage, a D-rank mage summon. Although she was originally considered a magical failure, an ancient explosive dragon slumbered within her, making her an incredibly powerful fire attribute damage dealer. Her early skills were ordinary, but once Hungyo helped awaken her potential, she could obtain the broken skill known as predation. Without Hungyo, that skill could never be unlocked, which was why Jinwoo had been the only player capable of using Pokryong properly. Pokryong excitedly called out to her lord and stated that she had truly missed him. Jinwoo struggled to maintain a straight face after seeing her bright smile. Before anything else, he instructed the summons not to speak whenever other people were around. He further told them to call him Jinwoo instead of God Jinu. Feeling completely exhausted, Jinwoo stated that they should all head home and get some rest. The moment he reached his bed, he collapsed and quickly fell asleep. Meanwhile, Hungyo, Pokryong, and Ramba remained awake. Hungyo greeted Ramba and remarked that it had been a long time. Ramba replied that they had only known each other briefly before being separated. as she had already existed when Hungyo was recruited. Hungyo affirmed that detail but remarked that it changed nothing. According to him, there was only one thing worth discussing. They were far too weak. He bluntly stated that they still had a long way to go if they wished to be of any assistance to their lord in the future. Therefore, even while their lord slept, they needed to continue training. Turning toward Pokryong, he ordered her to sit down and focus on sensing mana. Once her awakening occurred, he intended to unlock predation for her evolved form. He then turned his attention to Ramba and remarked that her attack speed still needed improvement. Because of that, she would be doing strength training with him. Ramba immediately cried out in protest. Hungyo calmly questioned whether she intended to remain useless to their lord, but Ramba immediately denied it. Hungyo then ordered her to begin swinging her frying pan. Since it was her first day, they would only do 5,000 repetitions. The number immediately horrified Ramba. Trembling, she silently prayed for Jinwoo to save her as Hungyo dragged her away for training. The following day, the scene shifted to headquarters. Park Chang-sok was informed that they could no longer provide Jinwoo with additional low-grade summoning scrolls. Surprised, he questioned the reason. Yu Jia explained that an official notice had arrived directly from the headquarters director. Park Chang-sok was puzzled, wondering why someone that important would suddenly concern himself with such a minor issue. Yu Jia further reported that headquarters was demanding a detailed explanation regarding where all the low-grade summoning scrolls taken so far had been used. Park Chang-sok immediately cursed under his breath. Yu Jia added that examiner Im Hae-soo appeared to have pulled some strings behind the scenes. This only irritated Park Chang-sok further, as he remarked that she constantly opposed his decisions. When Yu Jia questioned what they should do, she explained that she had already prepared the necessary documents. However, if the Management Bureau completely cut off the scroll supply, they would have nothing left to provide Jinwoo. Park Chang-sok knew that the next batch was almost due for delivery. Just then, his phone suddenly rang. Seeing that it was Jinwoo, he immediately noted his message. As Park Chang-sok noted, they would no longer need to provide him with additional low-grade summoning scrolls. More importantly, Park Chang-sok felt that he now had to settle matters with Im Hae-soo, because he had received a message from Jinwoo confirming that he no longer required the scrolls because he had already obtained what he wanted. The message also thanked him for all the support he had provided. Meanwhile, the scene shifted toward Gwanaksan Mountain. As Jinwoo stood before a dungeon portal, he reflected that this was considered a normal dungeon. In this world, there were 4 types of dungeons. The first was the daily dungeon, which provided specific daily rewards. The second was the Tower of Trials, a place far more difficult than ordinary dungeons where players tested their limits in exchange for massive rewards. The third was the Chaos Dragon Raid, a special raid boss encounter that had not yet appeared, so there was little reason to discuss. Every other dungeon fell into the category of a normal dungeon, which was exactly where he intended to go this time. In the game, they had once been called stage dungeons, but in reality, they simply appeared randomly throughout the world. Although party play was possible, Jinwoo had no particular need to search for teammates. Approaching the portal, Jinwoo reflected that if too much time passed after a dungeon appeared, a dungeon break would occur and monsters would spill into the outside world. As he reached the entrance, one of the employees stopped him and stated that his player license needed to be checked before entry. Jinwoo handed over his card without complaint. After verifying his identity, the employee affirmed that everything was in order and advised him to be careful. Nodding, Jinwoo stepped through the portal. The moment he entered, crackling lightning flashed around him. Looking ahead, he witnessed a battlefield filled with soldiers and orcs locked in fierce combat. Observing the scene, Jinwoo immediately recognized the situation. This was a subjugation dungeon, and a large-scale battle was already underway.